Hello and welcome back. A relatively new Bitcoin whale has just increased their portfolio holdings by more than double, and they have absolutely no plans of selling a penny anytime soon. Let's get into what this means for the market and what this means for your portfolio. So first of all, take a look at the market today. Bitcoin currently trading at a price of $107,000, almost on the dot. And you can see that over the last 24 hours, volatility has been incredibly low. That is somewhat refreshing compared to these massive moves that we've seen over the last few days, driven by liquidations on both sides of the market, but primarily the longs getting absolutely wrecked and squeezed out, even since that massive historic $19 billion liquidation bloodbath that we saw last weekend. If we take a look at the liquidation levels here on CoinGlass, you can see much smaller action over the last 4 and 12 hours. $10 million worth of longs wrecked in the last 4 hours and about $30 million wrecked over the last 12 hours. If we extend this back to yesterday, that was something like $1 billion total liquidations for the 24-hour time frame. And you can see on the liquidation map that we are pretty much in equilibrium. Okay, there is about $465 million worth of liquidations risk on both the long and the short side, and that shape of this chart is pretty much balanced, with maybe a slight bias to the upside, a slight bias to being closer to liquidating shorts, but nothing to write home about. Of course, if we extend this to the 30-day time horizon, the majority of the market is positioned shorts, and that equates to nearly $5 billion worth of short liquidation risk, up at $118,300, in contrast to just about $1.6 billion worth of long liquidation risk, now down at 95,000. I think price action quite clearly subdued over the weekend. Market taking a bit of a pause, taking a bit of a break, and I think the action will resume again on Monday, potentially pending further updates about the Trump-China tariff war. But as I mentioned at the start of the video, there is a new whale wallet on the block, and they have just more than doubled their holdings, and that is the US government. So look at this. The feds have seized $15 billion worth in crypto from a pig butchering scheme involving forced labor camps. A pig butchering scheme is essentially one where the scammer warms up the pig and fattens them up by getting to know them on a personal level. So they'll engage with the victim via fake accounts, sometimes on dating apps, sometimes just on messaging apps, and basically incite them into trading, usually on a fake platform or something like that, so that they can build trust, build a relationship, get them trading more and more, and then eventually, because it's a fake platform or a number of different other mechanisms, they can then take all of their money. But the ins and the outs of this particular case are absolutely fascinating, and it's pretty dark actually. So federal prosecutors seized $15 billion in cryptocurrency from an investment scheme known as pig butchering that they allege emanated from forced labor camps in Cambodia. Prosecutors unsealed an indictment Tuesday charging Chen Zi, a Chinese emigre who holds several passports and built the Cambodian-based Prince Group, one of the country's largest conglomerates, charging him with money laundering and conspiracy and wire fraud conspiracy. Chen remains at large. In related action, the Treasury Department sanctioned dozens of affiliates from the Prince Group and designated them as criminal organizations. The crackdown comes in as an investment scam known as pig butchering, named for the practice of fattening up the prey, that is the pig, before the slaughter, have been on the rise, costing Americans millions of dollars. Authorities say they seized 127,271 Bitcoin, which is now in US custody, that is currently valued at about $15 billion. Christopher Raya, the assistant director in charge of the FBI's New York field office, told CNN it's one of the largest pig butchering schemes they've investigated. The scams are rampant, and the FBI is focusing on the biggest cases to try and stop harm. Not too beautiful. So this is where things get dark, right? Chen and others allegedly operated at least 10 forced labor camps across Cambodia since 2015 to engage in cryptocurrency investment schemes. Authorities allege they laundered criminal proceeds through the business and paid bribes to government officials to stay ahead of criminal investigations. So they had these forced labor camps basically running thousands of mobile phones from which they operated, pretending to be these trustworthy characters, building rapport with victims, getting them to invest loads of money, and then taking that money. And all to the tune of about $15 billion. So we go. Tuesday, Caesar may give the new strategic Bitcoin reserve a huge injection of value and legitimacy. And how much value was that, in fact? So the US government now holds about 325,292 Bitcoin. And the total valuation of that at current prices is about $36 billion. So, of course, since March, the policy of the US government has been to build this strategic Bitcoin reserve from the proceeds of criminal investigations and seizures from crime. So, the good news is, for right now, there is absolutely zero policy plan to sell any of that Bitcoin, and that basically results in supply shock. Okay, that is supply worth $36 billion now that is off market. Okay, that is not going anywhere. Of course, as we know, the laws of supply and demand dictate that when supply goes down, price comes up. There's obviously a bear case for this as well. And the danger is now, with the US government being such a large whale in the market, and that would place them, by the way, as one of the biggest individual Bitcoin holders in the market at all. There's obviously a risk there, right? If in the future policy changes and they do decide to start selling, more likely future administration decides they want to sell that to fund some project or just because of general policy change, then of course the exact opposite of supply shock comes into play and do a situation where there's suddenly a lot of supply that's about to be dumped on the market. It also means that now we don't just have to look at the charts, okay, and we don't just have to look at liquidity to make decisions about the future of Bitcoin and the future of crypto. We have to look at governments, right? It's playing back into the field of centralized control. But as I say, for now, I see this as nothing but a bullish thing. Okay, there's more Bitcoin there that's been taken off the market that we know isn't going to be sold, and as always, reduced supply, steady demands, prices go up. So we are in the bullish case of this scenario right now. So there we have it. Price action very subdued over the last 24 hours. Very low volatility. Liquidation risk, at least in the immediate sense, is balanced. But as I've spoken up before, there is a massive short liquidation risk building up in the market. I still maintain that this dip has been a massive buying opportunity. I'm still accumulating spots. And as I spoke about yesterday, we seem to be seeing tightening circles, okay, tightening loops of this scenario, this playbook where the market sees green shoots, jumps in on long leverage and gets liquidated. The market sees green shoots, jumps in on long leverage, gets liquidated and prices come down. And that can only happen so many times before eventually retail just runs out of juice, just runs out of motivation, runs out of money, and runs out of the ability to borrow and leverage into those longs. And at that point, it makes sense, finally, for the big whales to come in, sweep up supply, and hopefully continuation of the bull run. But there we go. Of course, that is just what I'm looking at, just my thoughts. Nothing I say should be considered financial advice. It is purely my opinion, shared for entertainment purposes. Plenty more to come. Catch you in the next one. Bye.